Здесь еще один стаканчик. Здесь есть, ага. Спасибо. Здесь есть. Надевать. Лен заходил. Лен, привет. Как дела твои?
Коллеги, сейчас небольшой технический заминка по презентации.
Colleagues, there is a little technical, some technical issues that need to be taken care of.
Я не знаю, как Никита Александрович сам будет диктовать.
Я люблю власть, вы знаете.
Ну тогда в другой руке вот это, пожалуйста.
И на самом деле микрофон вот на таком расстоянии примерно. Я понимаю, скажите. Сейчас презентация, просто иначе мы не сможем процессить.
А тут какая чувствительность у микрофона? Примерно вот. У нас последний. Вот такая. Небольшая презентация, но такая. Мне кажется, дают ссылки на выступление. Всех других вычислительных процессов.
В общем, система является базовой.
Поэтому вам отдали первое слово, чтобы вы начинали.
Сделаем, начнем, а потом продуктом. Да? Все здание библиотеки делит священные символы. В общем, здесь все еще есть?
Конечно. С той стороны.
С той стороны. Вот она.
Ничего.
История.
Добрый день. Добрый день.
Good afternoon, dear forum participants, dear colleagues. People who are interested in the topic of smart cities and standardization, members of the video translation, video conference participants. It's dedicated to standardization as the tool of a smart city development. In the first place, I would like to say a few words about this forum that we are running our session during the conclusive third day of the event, and there was a number of events that were precursors to the topics that we are going to consider. It's a TC 176 session and 711 TC session, and for smart standards, and the construction, the one on construction, and It's a horizontal concept to some extent, which determines the tasks for a number of technical committees and in the first place, I would like to give floor to Mr. Nikita Urkin, head of the Technical Committee 194, Director for Technical Standards of the NTI platform, with a presentation about how the system of systems concept works as applied to smart cities. I'm very happy to be in St. Petersburg today, and this is my native city, and the topic of smart cities is actually quite applicable and very hot currently, because when we are talking about the topic of smart cities, we understand that we have been taught actually that's a system of systems, and it's hard to not to agree with it. In fact, there is a horizontal nature of the issue that is displayed in this, because the way the modern cities look, it hasn't changed for years and for decades. Over the last decades, we have added the digital and technologies and a lot of other IT to this topic. It's one horizontal topic has met the other horizontal topic, and the Internet of Things, for example, and NTM devices, various sensors, etc. In many cases, we're not seeing them, and they exist everywhere, and we know where our taxis are, how the buses are moving around through the streets, and due to that, we are also tracking the temperature, and there are many other scenarios. And there are many integral parts of the Internet of Things which are connected with our daily life, and people often encounter the Internet of Things and they may say that actually we do not. But in fact, they will be actually looking at the smartphone or pulling out of their pocket the smartphone, which is in fact a part of the networks and the Internet of Things and the digital world in the consumer domain, which results in the smart city concept. It's a deep permeation of the digital technologies, and often in the Russian terminology field, they're called throughput technologies. It's a fine definition from the consumer point of view. And in modern cities and not so modern cities, in fact, the number of technologies under different marketing labels is quite big. And on many pictures, we can see that the smart power sector and different elements of the virtual reality, etc., they permeate into the urban space and they become an integral part of the city, and the consumer properties that guests and residents of the city obtain are connected with their implementation. So amidst all those problems, the most important one is interoperability, and it's a big question. Now I'm moving over to the topic of standards, and in the first place, why it is important? Because we can be talking about it for a long time, and because it's a system of systems, and it's obvious that we need to understand how they interplay with each other. And there are no plausible answers, no other plausible answers. But we should also understand that to a large extent we are being faced with those issues because we want to know how the effectiveness, efficiency is provided within every system, because we are all Russian people in a broad sense. So it's like a Matryoshka doll. There are tasks on the Matryoshka level, and if we are moving over to some theoretization, some generalization, it's a little bit of an academic. And we single out in our work 3 levels of standardization, which are not so difficult, quite logical, and I would like to actually dwell on them because, to a large extent, it enables the esteemed speakers to stop a little bit on each of those floors and go a little bit deeper into their theme. The basic fundamental level, it's a basic standard. Sometimes we call it a basic standard or something like that. So it's terms and definitions, and people, practical people, often say, so why do we need those terms? Why do we need those definitions? Why do we need to be so science intensive? But they are speaking in completely different terms. We talk about tender documents, commercial shopping, when we are trying to determine the elements of modern infrastructure, and it's difficult to deal with it in abstract terms because it's difficult in the absence of a plausible technical document to discuss what a server is, because already on this stage you can get something you were not thinking about, because there are many stakeholders, and you can take any field as an example, and we're talking about the smart city. It goes beyond the limits, and everybody who comes in, gets in touch with this urban environment, the municipals, businesses, logistics, transportation, housing utility services, and this touch is very important. So it's a typical architecture. And in the first place, we are talking about IT architecture. They may become referent architectures, and already on the basic, on the concept level, they can provide for some common approaches, because even then the cost of integration, it's actually very important for all those projects. So this cascade funding of the projects which gets unraveled in the regions and cities. So each city is a new unit, and it's costs of the standardization. So referent architecture in the field of digital technologies, big data, etc., it removes a lot of future risks and optimizes the costs very seriously. And also, to a large extent, we are working with the technology community and with the startups and large technology companies. And of course, many people want to play a little bit this game, but of course it's getting more and more difficult to survive in this paradigm. Of course, proprietary solutions, they are going to be compressed more and more, and in this topic there is a certain amount of analytics which supports it. So it's a basic level. There is no actually stakeholder, no. We cannot. Nobody can assume this work upon oneself to create the system, because very often the stakeholders who could have become involved with it, they are seeing a threat to their proprietary nature, and as a result, there would be there would be benefits. And in this respect, the task that the government and our standard would see, and the Institute of Standardization, we should emphasize that. I do not like very much to quote the big shots, the officials, because sometimes I feel ashamed, sometimes it's not clear. For example, I can quote Vice Premier Chernyshenko, who during one of his last interviews said that we do have an ecosystem for IT and digital technologies. Another thing is that sometimes it's accessible and sometimes it's not. And why? It's because all the problems, all the hidden threats, they become evident on that level. And another is the blood and flesh of the digital economy, the digitalization of all the activities. Those are the standards of the products and services in a broad sense. They are technology standards to a large extent. And what fields are those? They are... There are different types of games. Sometimes there are table games, sometimes... and over the last 5 years, in the Russian engineering community, so not the one that have not been consciously realized as bullshit bingo. You can take any technology. So we take information system with blockchain elements, with artificial intelligence, and also there are technology companies. So it's like a tribute to fashion to some extent. But it's more important that in those technological themes there are huge layers of opportunity, where we sometimes, as an economy, there is nothing scary about it. For example, there are international protocols and standards in the Internet of Things. So, to some extent, it has access some meso international level, and it shouldn't be really changed or altered very much when it crosses the Russian border. So we should be opening for the Russian manufacturers and developers those things in order for them to be able to feel more comfortable in the international markets. And there are markets which are not fully established, where there are no broadly expressed standards. There is certain cloud of opportunities, and there are no attempts to access the international community. And here I mean not only classical institutes such as ISO, IEC, or ITU, or some IEEE ones where it's more like an informal expert level. But in principle, I am talking about the expert community. And even though Wi-Fi protocol is not formalized and recorded, so it's based on a specification stage. So it's the standard has become an unwritten international standard, and such ways of promotion are possible. Of course, macroeconomics does not always facilitate that, but what is the number of the unicorns that have left Russia? Of course, they are left here, but we should be... we should not access external markets and to try to use the external technological and other opportunities. And of course, it's something that finds its place in the city And I have mentioned before the interface protocol. Of course, there is some hygienic level of interface. How do we communicate if we don't have vocabularies? It's a Tower of Babel, but we do communicate somehow. And now the language of our communication is Russian, and the hygienic level, the basic level, of course, is the protocol type standards, interface protocols, and it is especially important here to this 4G, LTE, and other infrastructure, but objectivity is, of course, 5G, and of course, in the future, we should be looking at 6G. Of course, it's obvious. So we should be moving towards more promising things, which means more independent in the vendor sense, potentially more effective, and have those anti-proprietary concepts. And an important example is this open drum story, but because it would have consumed a huge amount of the time which had been allocated for this session. Speaking about this hygienic level, but there are other standards for the products and services. Digital duplicates, home internet, and other things which are related to each other. And the third level is something that singles out smart city, not only in terms of the complexity of communications, but also the multiplicity of the established interface networks. And we are adding something new to the system. If it's growing exponentially, or at least on the geometrical progression. So what are we talking about? We're talking about such a phenomenon that some call it connectivity, some call it ultra connectivity. So it's interface interoperation, and it's an integral part of such process. All the instruments, all the devices should be able to communicate between each other, apart from the integration and interoperability issues. So the trust factor is growing in time, and while so we try to often release. So often such story we see that such stories are not going to gain any popularity because the operational costs are very high. And I have referred to high-level official ones. And there has been an interesting interview dedicated to this topic, this confidence issue, and we often discuss the cases when, according to the housing utility meter, you can choose the time to rob an apartment, for example, by reading the meter for water supply or gas. And also you can use a sensor to get very deep into a system. So in this context, it's very sad that we are hearing news for Telegroup. So as I'm continuing this,
maybe heard that there's such a phenomenon in the Russian translation. It's a meta-universe, but I think it's not a good term. I mean, I've got a suggestion about a new term for this. There's not enough interaction of the devices on physical level. It's not enough for them to generate huge data volumes, which big part of it is it's just waste and scrap. It's age computing and high level of intellectual level. So you get to the cutting edge of the technology, and it's essential for this these products. And potential risks are growing, but actually the benefits are different again. Also, it refers to housing and utilities, utility sector, but also something more complicated like healthcare and also education and professional life of humans. Generally, all this gives this great system, the foundation, a set of systems, and system of systems, and all this requires standardization. And it's not just a standardization, but also actually it's a perception of all of the market, all of the marketplace, and it should be developed from the viewpoint of their active standing as a priority. Our priorities of our activity of our colleagues we would mention necessity firstly public stakeholders and governmental stakeholders deep involved in this, and also all the marketplace great environment for verification and stuff, and those have been out of reach, and all these issues of documents lifetime, they should be very high adaptivity level of it, to be very flexible, and also this promotion of this. When I was going along the corridor, I stopped at some all-time gas standards, and actually about requirements for beer. In those Soviet times, there was no need to popularize for people to his Zhiguli beer brand to be brewed by the GOS standards. So there's actually the developer, in terms of the developer, that comply his activity, hold his activity in compliance with the standards, and that actually the customer of the property should demand the gas from the developer. Based on this presentation, it's clear that in the city, as a pinnacle of social life of people, the digital technologies are essential, and they're essentially interrelated. You can't speak about big data topics separately from ITM systems, from Internet of Things. You can speak about the twins, with no understanding how these twins are being assembled. So no machine learning can be created without knowing the basis of it. So we speak about, say, weak, I stress on the term weak AI. Won't be without clear interaction with the whole of the ecosystem. So you cannot deal with this point separately. You cannot separate interaction points, and so you cannot chop them into pieces and then glue them back together. So this kind of throughput nature actually joins all the parts of this puzzle, of this topic. Otherwise, we'll be dealing with a quilt. We'll be trying to take a quilt and try to do something reasonable after this patchwork. So to do sort of a Babylon. I mentioned some standard for protocols and information exchange for the digital twins, and there are some standards, but there are some national standards related to smart cities I mentioned previously, and actually they include the high relevance of these documents in the present slide, but you can make super duper standards for high for high-flown things, but we understand that the customer is the down-to-earth demands. It's real people. It's for housing, for transport, and all these documents that require some prompts. So we do some recommendation of the correct approach to using this or this products and services. We need to make a follow-up, recommending documents on the use, like user guides. When it'll be Annex 1, when how to work with describing the work with this crocodile. Otherwise, we won't get to real situations. And like maybe like tractor operator will be cheating the satellite system of monitoring. He'll lift the wheels and start winding up the mileage or something else, and he'll be. So you see, this approach cannot stand with this patchwork approach, the scrappy approach. I would like to finalize with the compliments of the quality journalist work. In the community, as has been said, we can be actually fascinated with standardization. Will be super smart and will accelerate the procedures and actually state brilliant standards, but we won't be able to knock on the door of the final users. So I can't help mention one brilliant journalist works as one was to using the standards that just housing and utilities. The efficiency of the standards performance is 30%. So to make believe that it is so, it's also great labor. So popularization of this work is also a big bulk of this work. And digital technologies facing big technological companies with a lot of young, ambitious people working for them. Many times we look like dinosaurs with our bulky structures. We need to look for actually the joining points. So I'd like to finish with this, but my contacts are known, but I'll duplicate my contacts on the final slide. So thanks for your attention. I hope that the presentation was an introductory, but still interesting. Thanks very much. Yes, very interesting, systematic presentation. So we won't be. So it's on the 13th, the first edition of basic standards on national standards of digital standards was posted. As one of the areas of its application, the protocols have been developed as they will simplify the further use of the for the end organizations, then users will simplify the use of these documents for them. And just carrying on with these topics about interoperability of the committees, how it's you've talked about this, that there's two ways of horizontal of interaction. As sometimes we've returned to 3D. An electrotechnical commission started generating a couple of years ago system committees to arrange the work of a number of technical committees in developing the standards in this technical committees of smart city. So the idea of sustainable development by UN, and I'd like to give the floor to Galina Nikolaevna. On social certification Russian register. I'd like to question to Nikita Alexander, your technical committee, which part of smart cities is used? So what's the definition of the smart cities? How do you measure this smartness, the level of its intelligence? We've got standard of intelligence cities, smart cities, and there are lots of letters, and I don't agree with some of them. So it's a great question. I will speak about the efforts on the official level. All the efforts on this. On the official level to relate to the topic of smart cities, smart regions, and to address this issue and to measure it. So I'm not criticizing Minister of Construction. They said that Minister said we got a list of solutions and we consider them as smart. So there's been no expert assessment and no compatibility scheme made. So we've gone from this. You just tick them out. Tick them out. And so we had all kind of approaches, but one of the approaches was just tick them out. What's done? So with our involvement in the framework, with the systematic committee of on smart cities involvement, so we and so a number of committees, so we've approved the standard. Two standards. The first one, ICT indicators. It's information communication technology indicators. And the other one is the wider for all the smart cities. And actually they're complete, all of them. They're exhaustive, all of them. And the percentage is a number per 1,000 units of the buildings that are roofed. It's a very good indicator for Latin America. So everything is roofed. It's smarter than it's not roofed. How much this indicator is relevant for Russia? I think no, it's not that good indicator. So we're working with, in parallel with the relevant international document, there's indicator of smart city in Russia. Many experts actually failed. Everything was so nice and funny that and jolly that now we've got a final edition. It's a Minstroi and Telecom, like construction and telecom ministries. They don't give go ahead, and so just looking at each other and waiting for the final verification. But this document is available, hasn't been approved, and I don't know whether it's going to be approved. And just if there is no awareness of the stakeholder. But the text, even not unformalized, but even clarified by the community, they become viable. And there is more. There's another stage on the FIT project of a digital region. That's we are ready. Thank you very much. I think all present here didn't get the complete answer, whether there is a definition of what the smart city is, or intelligent citizen. But it's crucial, especially if not for the technical specialists to understand, but the general population to understand what smart city means. When I speak about 115 technical committee, this term popped up there. And if we base on this, actually then your amendments will be fit in. We've got a lot of technical committees where they've got use the word sustainability, smart, and on and on and on. But I think we need to actually collaborate tight and make these terms to be understandable not just for a specialist but also for general public. So it's not by chance that I brought up this example. So in the early of the 2000s, there was a new word that popped out. There was buzzword innovation. I think still now nobody understands what innovation products means, because there's no term, but the innovation products represents developments that even cannot do for modernization. Then I think we needed to actually to rectify this mistake when we speak about smart things, standard of quality and life journal. I would like to thank it. So recently they've been publishing our developments, where we try to show why we've taken up this topic. Which way we are dealing with international committee, technical committee, and so we need contacts with many technical committees to shape this work and make the roadmap that let us, namely, go in this direction structurally. One of the articles in the fourth article, 2000, was related to development of smart cities. This article considered the issue of development of smart cities and smart adaptive. There are buzzwords and very in circulation. When issuing new standards, we are arguing and we're trying to sort out with the lawyers to answer the question whether it's smart or whether it's some other features something different. So there are options of employing different technologies of smart cities, and efficiency and non-efficiency technology points are raised. And there are some technology that entail a number of documents, and we can, it's about a sick leave documents, and sometimes they're not considered as a product. So we justify the need of using the standards when we speak about smart cities, and also we refer to international practice of this kind of standards. So sustainable development of smart cities can undoubtedly need a systematic approach, and standardization gives us this systematic approach and lets us shape this processes the way that are understood by everybody. So currently, this is ISO, where 22,000 standards have been developed related to smart cities area, and it's information from ISO. So now new changes in standardization legislation, new vision and work of technical committees let us work at the civil society and come to consensus in decision making. It's very good. Our technical committee is a consensus, and but it's yet better when it comes to inter-committees. And the activities of the committees is the basis of the development of national standardization. And actually it can leverage resolving the systematic task on managing the cities and territories, and this brings to new standards related to sustainable development on smart cities. How have we come to this?
At the beginning of the 2000s, I've been working at our St. Petersburg Institute for Regional Development, and the topic of quality of living and sustainable development, we saw that there is no unified terminology and understanding of this idea. And we started to look around the world, and we found in 2012 the TC 268 for sustainable cities, and local communities has been created with ISO, and now it's called the Sustainable Development of Communities. And frankly speaking, those transitions, it was connected with the fact that actually the territory of the cities and the idea of the city is different. And now I'm going to be showing what manuals and standards have been developed, and for the last the Chinese have started to develop their standards, and actually for them a small city is a city of not several hundred thousand but several million residents. So we have approached the TC with a proposal to create our own TC, which has been established, and the secretariat thereof is located in St. Petersburg. So here you should pay attention to the fact that there are a few words for TC 268, and I would like to say that how popular it is becoming. If in the beginning there were 11 members to it, now it's 41 countries, and the countries that were the observers now there used to be 16, now there are 29, and over the last year the US have left that committee, and others are interested and growing. So it is we are interested in creating the documents which enable us to understand correctly and manage the idea of sustainability. Our Committee 115 consists of 2 subcommittees, one of which was terms and definitions, and in this, along the same lines, we have the standards related to management of the territory, and the other one more relates to the indicators which need to be measured and on the basis of which one should be managing. Of course, we can have a verbal definition, good, bad, etc., but the digital one is, of course, more important. And this is what technical committees are working at. So members to TC 115 are 116 organizations. Mostly they are universities, they are the Consumer Rights Protection Association, and Anti-Monopoly Committee, and other interested organizations. And why I want to say that is because we have started to develop those committees. We are open for interface, and this is why our information in the journals and today's International Day of Standards will once again give us flow in order to address the topic of our technical committee and get involved in its operation. So there is a state standard for attaching the organizations to those technical committees for interface with them, and a representative was Evgeny Avanesov, who is also working at the Institute of TC 207, and his activity related to the management in those directions led to the fact that he is working quite actively with this TC. Of course, lately the sessions have been remote and the work goes on, and the standards appear. I would also like to mention that TC 268 has been attended by TC 100 and the construction TC.
посещают заседания технических комитетов, наблюдают именно за своим направлением, которое...
And we are watching over our area, which provides for several sustainable development goals, but to a larger extent, we are not expecting a reverse result from them. And TC115, which is a methodological or terminology-based trend, will keep under its umbrella the currently operational committees. Mostly it's three important areas: the terminology, the management, the indicators, etc. And there are several working groups which get together and then split, and we can talk about the smart transport and smart city. It's for measurement, etc. And as of today, in the technical committee, we have 38 standards. It's standards of various levels, and 18 are being developed. And under this umbrella, the development of standardization and smart cities can be protected from being excessively blown up. And a little bit of about those committees and management system. It was one of the first ones to be issued. There has been no terminology standard, but that standard has been issued. Why it happened is because it was clear how 17 goals via the city management project process, how they can come into being, and it was the first standard that has appeared, and you can see how many of them exist when it comes to the name and to the direction, and so it may be, you may get connected to it, but so we are not adopting it to the national standards, but they exist and you can use them. So the next one is the city indicators, and it's something that I mentioned, and it's the approach to those indicators which can be measured in the smart cities. And when we are looking at them, sometimes it's funny, but on the other hand, it's this simple understanding for the population. So once again, it's an area which should be measured.
Причем под каждым индикатором определены основные и вспомогательные показатели.
So it's main and auxiliary indicators that are determined.
Показатели должны быть базовыми, но не запрещается как раз.
So they should be basic ones, and taking into account the variety of countries and territories, we should add what we should improve, what we should manage. And in some countries there are such indicators. And in parallel to the work of this technical committee, we have created a club of smart cities where 7 of our cities have become members. And there has been a desire, and we want to maybe on that base try to experiment. So economy, education, power sector is something that has to be measured. And one of the examples is something that's related to standardization in the field of smart cities and the telecommunications. Of course, here the main areas are indicated which the international community finds important, and the infrastructure of the standards is represented here, and we see that there are TCs working on the basis of that infrastructure, and those are the names of the working groups that have been actively involved and become a part. And there are 17 more or less secondary ones.
Что касается вот последующей деятельности технических комитетов, мы опять видим все очень близко к тому, чтобы достигать.
So I'm seeing it, and we are very close to it. And the main thing is to measure those goals, and I'm proposing to everyone who is working in that direction to once again get familiarized with this and choose the roadmap and think about what has been adopted as the national standards and what can be taken as recommendations and used in our work. And once again, I'm scrolling through the pages in order for you to be able to see those names of those things that are being used worldwide.
О нашем техническом комитете и что мы на сегодняшний день выпустили. Значит, у нас, обратите внимание, кроме стандартов,
and apart from the standards related to the TC 268,
системы менеджмента в органах власти.
It's related to the system of management and with the public authorities. And if the authorities do not understand how managers works in the field of quality without using it, it makes no sense to work in that respect. And there are terms and definitions that have appeared, a standard for management, standard for indicators, and there are many indicators that are changing. And our technical committee, we cannot claim leading first and second place. However, our members are working quite actively. And so from 200 we have moved to the 80th position, and in terms of our rating, and of course in terms of our position, we are gradually moving upwards without lowering the bar. And when it comes to the national standardization plan, those are additional standards to standard number 120 when it comes to main indicators, and they have to do with smart or intelligent cities or adaptive cities. So, how much can a city restore itself, and what is required for that if some troubles happen? Because on the example of the pandemic, we are seeing that it's a structure, there is some kind of a structure, because political, economic, bacteriological and other effects that may exist and cover the entire international community says that we should understand what to do 1, 2 and 3, so civil defense and everything should be taken into account here, and I'm seeing it, and I'm finalizing my presentation, and of course I hope that these presentations will be available and you will be able to finally get familiarized with them. So I'm coming back to my proposals, which so a few words. How did those indicators, so the 6 main tasks that have been determined, there have been indicators that were chosen and that need to be monitored, and the crossing of those tasks and indicators it has to be changed, and every city had to do it for itself in order to determine which indicators need to be complemented.
специалистов для органов власти,
And those institutes which deal with the training of specialists for the authorities, they should take this trend as a strategic one for themselves. So there is this circular diagram where you can see how this task is being implemented. The experience of China, which is the head of the working group for smart cities jointly with the French, and you see how difficult it is to measure those tasks. And as I am completing my speech today, my presentation today, I would like to state that in the first place we should consolidate our work in the field of consolidation and sustainable development. In the first place, we should continue the studies in order to understand in what direction we are moving, and to recommend the administrations of the cities and territories to use this terminology apparatus to manage, to control the cities. And one of those recommendations to the schools on all the study levels to not only consider the standardization, but also the technology of creating standards in terms of the management of smart cities. And the main thing is the need for a target program on standardization for the purposes of sustainable development, especially since those standards are directly interfacing with the national, sectoral, and other programs that exist nationwide today. Thank you. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. In fact, it happened so that we were issuing from the international experience jointly with Skolkovo and going over to the sustainability of healthcare, and then we're getting immersed in the other things. So it's national goals, normally the hierarchy is that's national goals, and then floor-level goals. So if we're talking about the standard of sustainable areas, even if all cities in the country implement this, we don't have standards on all levels, which means that the previous speaker, Nikita, I haven't remembered the patronymic, and he has mentioned the technologies, and even if we make it on the level of the technologies, we are not going to get a sustainable country, because essentially the standard for sustainable organization is missing. Because we wanted to get a set of ISO standards in order to determine what a sustainable organization is and work at this decomposition a little bit. What is necessary for a country, for a sector, for an organization, and for the understanding of a sustainable technology? So we don't have that yet, and you said very well about putting that into the programs. And when I was analyzing Europe, US, and other countries, in each university there is a course on sustainability. Of course, the US have the most obscure ones, because after those one-year-long courses, there is very little you can understand. So it's you should make those sustainability courses on all levels, because even at schools in Europe there are those courses, not only on standardization, but actually on sustainability, and it would be good if it would really be a decision, a solution. So how do you think it could be integrated, the sustainability on the level of the country, sector, territory, etc.?
Спасибо большое за вопрос. На самом деле я не успела еще сказать.
So I haven't been able to say that, but yesterday the sessions, the representatives of Ministry of Industry and Trade, we have created a council which is destined to solve the sustainability issues, and then the sector will develop and but it's not developing because it hasn't been mentioned.
We started talking about it in March, so we started talking that there will be a project with the studies and the developments, because the sustainability issue report is needed for many industries for understanding as a compulsory. It's around that we need to analyze what's around and consider actually our studies and our backlog and create these standards. And it's been resolved in Ministry of Standard and Ministry of Trade, and which way it's gonna to be implemented, we'll see. So thanks for your question. We've been speaking about the set of standards, about the terminology we're speaking about all this. But also in the 37th series, there is a standard of organizations. Standard of organization management. But actually we need the measurements, we need the metrics. Thanks for your question. Actually, this topic and this question has been, this topic has been set off, and it's been in development. In our circle, we are considering. So I apologize that I'm still in your time, but I can't help speaking. The sustainable development, it's a very dynamic thing. It's been changing faster than technologies. So what's been discussed globally on sustainable development is more about environment, about carbon footprint. He says, don't argue, please. And it's this way. And we'll look at sustainable companies and organizations. It's another thing. So we can later on. Could I finalize? I also recommend a book by Professor I studied in Berkeley. It's January Porras, along with Jim Collins, who wrote a cycle of books. So what might be interesting for you in part of sustainable development organizations. Sustainable development is built forever. 6 years of a group of 15 students, maybe from Stanford. This base organization was there, and 2 professors was studying the history of organizations, and one of the inferences was this criteria of sustainability. They change in time, and while we're trying to find standards and figure out a standard, invent a standard, actually this condition will change. Thanks, Nikita. So the bottom line is actually been outdated along with the new concepts. Now, concept it's a sustainable improvement, and it encompasses and criteria triple top and triple bottom. It's another level. It's the latest model. It's called the latest model is a sustainable improvement model. But it's all, I agree with you. It's all in dynamics. If we try to fix something, there is a risk to start lagging behind. So yesterday there was a plenary session dedicated to the sustainable development, and thanks very much, Nikolai, for this profound presentation. Will be placed on the forum site and website, and it'll be along with the record. And so the 72nd and 115 committee can consider it as an example how it can be shaped up in these tough conditions. I would like to give the floor to Maxim Vyacheslavyich Dorofeyev as one of the indicators of construction. TC 465. It's term form. It's Urban Construction Institute. Thank you for giving me the floor. It's an honor to be involved and speak in this event of the standardization in the President's Library, premise of the President's Library. As being in St. Petersburg, I always try jump to the opportunity to come to the city. So what we see, it's actually this is a standard. It's a model of our country. My brief presentation will be dedicated to relationship, the technological horizons and the system. How much this
Несколько наших уважаемых докладчиков касались темы эволюции определений.
Some of our speakers touch upon the topic of definition of intelligent cities. Yes, the formulation is available, but I would like to go to the CPCI was mentioned. It's actually an inventory of human, digital, and material assets. So you can decompose the intelligent city. How to decompose it? I think the view, outside view of the developers would be of interest, and the view from those who provide the demand, local administration, the city administration, and all the authorities. It's to trigger discussion. So some contradictions. I'll be a critic of the standing they presented of the previous speakers. There are some fundamental problematic about how the technology of the smart city has been developed. This fundamental problematic of the developers is actually seen by having no champions in this. We are in a state of a very long start, and it's the structure of internal market and the range of products. They're of no matching. They don't match, and so there is such a discrepancy. There's a mismatch in terms of how can we get the quality of the city life in a quality way, using new technologies. Also, there is a warning signal from the part of the demand. Why? Because unlike the rest of the world, that is city administration oriented, because they actually are drivers of all the decisions. I would say the actually municipalities, municipal administrations, actually role is actually underestimated. And actually by the constitution, all these authorities were separated, and only last year there were some amendments to the constitution. Now we are getting back to the unity of public power, and it's important. Why is it important? Because if there is no as a management system of required capacity, that we cannot overcome the symmetry. So with these developers, that are developing these mega solutions, so we need to be happy. That way, so we've got very difficult regulation, and the one license FSB is enough to leave us with Rostelecom and Rostec that's doing something. We have the situation, actually the condition of the citizens of the Russian Federation. There's a Chance of Freedom that was signed in 18th century by Catherine the Great. So we've lost some of the benefits of the 18th century. So until we restore the national balance and we got their own profit base, profit framework of the cities, all these expectations are overestimated and they're counted too early. They're premature. So when we were preparing this kind of it's not downloaded. We were making recommendations in 2018 concerning this approach in digital transformation. Within the framework of this, we were making foreign stance analysis. We were interested in the practice and methodology, the approach, and we saw that our Chinese counterparts, they actually separate this technological and national-wide approaches on institutional levels. So because we speak about technological, we speak about this, and then institutional, they add up all the levels that are above the municipal level. So we were speaking about provinces and local, including all provinces and administration. It was very typical of the Russian Empire. It was used in the USSR when actual master plans were approved not by the city administration, but at the higher level. These institutional factors that don't let Russia to see the skyrocketing of this topic. We need to think how to rectify the situation, because implementation of the technology potential, and so the effect that they can bring is not possible without increasing the capacity of institutional system. We need to think how to increase this institutional capacity, especially with a smart region, smart city, and so on. It's pretty much the same. It's at one of the authority level, or it's actually the combination. There is enough resources to make the relevant decisions, and so far we see the lack of these resources. We saw what we were looking at national policy in the cities. We are lacking about capacity building system. We don't know how to train our customers. We have no standards for customers. And all issues related to incapability of manage of the technological products. It's a separate type of buys. You cannot buy it. You can purchase like milk in the shop. So to be able to purchase them, you have good understanding of how the technologies are developing and understand the process of its development and how to provide the quality, and the customer should have one's own systems how to do this. From this viewpoint, we're at the bottom. So it's going to be some growth, but now I'd like to comment briefly what the intelligent city in terms of the context of urban design. What is our subcommittee of construction? What is technical? 465 construction is intelligent city is an amalgamation. It's some marketing cliche. cliche, marketing cliche. It's a cliche, and the same as a city. It encompasses the set of technologies that can be at different levels of maturity, at different level of its marketability. Most of them relate to data management, analyzing this, giving the volumetric analysis and getting the effects from the fact that many kinds of solutions can be modeled before we start implementing them. And the specifics of decision-making, the solutions, actually some of the solutions are very costly. They are very capital intensive. So 12 national projects, 6%, it's 70% of the objects of capital construction. And actually the living environment is a very capital consuming, capital intensive thing, and the better we can develop and study it from the very start, then it can get more fruits at the stage of the implementations. A couple of words about technical committee, construction technical committee. Our technical committee is one of the biggest in Euro standard system. Certain main provisions were made for our committee that limits the curbs the limit number of participants down to 100. So those were curbed. So what's the top of the iceberg and underwater part of the iceberg? Standardization part of the construction weight in the USSR was separate and mirror system for GOST standards. So this decision was made separately. The USSR gifted us the positive experience of this kind of double body standardization body in industry separately, in industry and in construction separately. So what occurred later on? So the current stage, when the relevant agreement has been concluded and roadmap has been signed, there's a certain implementation has been prepared, and actually a marking certain, allocating certain focus areas. It's going to be within the Ministry of Construction realm. So this can be within block that's related within the living environment reproduction system. So living environment is the material basis of urban sustainable development. So they are main consumers of the methodology of sustainable developers, and it's implemented by making urban construction solutions, including territorial solutions. So we are now dealing with modernization of all these systems for construction. So usually we're based on the Soviet legal framework. So a number of documents on this. For urban construction, as for landscape improvement, also related to agricultural facilities and industrial facilities, systems that were all related to construction norms, but it was related to urban planning system, urban design. the way it is being implemented globally. And now when we face a serious issue, how separate this normalizing system, how can we have got plenty of tasks, we integrate it into this improvement of the landscape of the territory, and infrastructural utilities and the basis for implementing all the city functions that they make city the cities.
In that connection, the program that we have developed for ourselves is, of course, does include the international layer, and we need to understand how the international and national layers interface with each other. And in the principle, we are basing it on the standard that we have developed at ISO 268 standards. We have specific tasks of sorts, and each of these technical committees is facing with the tasks that actually are promoted by certain countries. For example, Sustainable Infrastructure Committee is Japan, on the whole 268 is France, and everywhere we are seeing this good idea. So every country should be taking its own decisions, but in the form in which it has been adopted, it actually gives this average temperature throughout the hospitals and doesn't take into account our advantages. And this is what we should be working at. We should make not a standard, but actually a manual. We should actually make a joint session and work at it. So I would like to briefly go through the main problems, because in fact, for the life cycle, of course, there is no harmonized metrology, no infrastructure of standardization. So about techno-optimism, I can criticize this technology optimism because to a large extent it undermines the value of the standard as reliable solutions that guarantee quality. And of course I'm ready to argue about that, because the ahead-moving standardization is more for the high purposes, and it is important if we have a developed infrastructure of standardization bodies, when on the one hand it's going ahead and on the other hand it's tested and includes international solutions where there is an evidence base or evidence base, yes. So we need have a national model. We cannot get by without that, and we need to take it into account. We need to accept it. We need to have so we don't have quote the comprehensive technologies, and if we have a high level of basic items. However, one would wish to have some kind of a coordination council, maybe on the basis of your committee, because it's a huge set of closely related issues, items, and in what sense we should think about it. We should coordinate the scientific research. But we should work at the best practices. Because a lot is being said, but it's hard to understand. We should have an independent assessment of those practices. We need to have greater efforts because we are catching up. Otherwise, we cannot use the advantages of forward-looking, catching up development. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive presentation. We have 2 more presentations. Please be concise and present your topics and the materials that you would like to share, given that they will be also presented on the forum website. And also, I would like to ask the colleagues to develop a forum summary that will be contained in those. So I would like to now give floor to Director General of NMCS LLC, Mr. Nikolai. Thank you, Nikolai. Thank you, Senator Alexander. I would like to be very brief. For a very simple reason, because everything that I was afraid of has happened. The aesthetics, the linguistic, the coordinate system of the previous discussions is absolutely doesn't match what I will be telling to you, and therefore we will do it as follows. In the first place, I would like to say something, to take part in the discussion by Nikita and Galina about the term and definition, and I'm taking part a little bit in TC1 operation in terms of IC terminology, and we have discussed there the terms and definitions, and the main thing was that in the definition should state that it's for the convenience of the residents, and everything else is not significant, reasonable infrastructure, etc. You can say that or not say that in this way or in that way. And from the point of view of the Russian language, the word smart is not actually very applicable. Reasonable is something different, but this is what it seems to me. So there is this little bridge from everything that was discussed to a very brief presentation by me, is that a lot has been mentioned about systemic nature, and the systemic nature is the main thing that I would like to say when it comes to electromagnetic compatibility as applied to smart city. I would like to, speaking about the standardization, so the closer or the better organized as any digital system. So we are saying that, of course, everything is fine. It's a smart city. It consists of this, this, and this. So this system are coming together in a more unified system, but it all consists of hardware. And having in mind that a smart city is a macro system, which in general based on the sense, the meaning, it should be not be functioning in an uninterrupted way. We are starting to think about whether the standards in electromagnetic compatibility are fit that we are using now. MAC, CISPR, CISPR, and other standards, intergovernmental standards, that they should be applied to a smart city. Smart city is a new system.
самое главное, что я сказал, это все должно функционировать непрерывно. То есть вот транспортные системы и так непрерывно. Вся эта электроника должна...
So it should be working in an uninterrupted fashion, and criteria of B, of the functioning for the disturbances interface. Only the A, when it does not depend on any electromagnetic interference. So let's move over here. So our technical committee for electromagnetic compatibility has developed a few standards which have been approved in 2019. So it's a general standard, standard mission, and standard for sustainability. I will not be explaining for a long time that it is correct or that it's within some kind of a line for all kinds of standards. Emission and sustainability are two parts of the M's. That technical instruments, what it emits and how sustainable it is to this kind of emissions, to this radiation. Why we have arrived at that conclusion that we need to develop it, to develop those standards, and I will say further that we have put in a proposal to develop 2 more standards for this series. Why? Because are they all suitable for the products in the M's field, whether they are fit for the concept of smart city? And you can say, yeah, they are, or maybe not. They are not, and only under the condition that there will be there are some systemic standards to be applied to it, which in a general sense are telling what actions are necessary, what rules, what procedures, and monitoring, and which no standards actually mention. It's actually a business of the regulator. Standardization is standardization, and if it deals with such an interesting and difficult system as a smart city, everything should be within those standards. And given that there are such standards, the remaining standards for the products, for computer machinery, for audio, video machinery, for a vertical takeoff electrical iron ore. So this is what we have developed our standards for, and this electromagnetic situation, functional safety, etc. And finally, we've made a proposal to develop 2 standards, and that's emission from technical means, which are located in the apartments. So I can be talking about another hour, half an hour, but and technical means which are located in the buildings, and because we live in the year 2021, and I can say in conclusion that of my presentation, why we have developed those standards. All the requirements, all the methodologies, all the compatibility assessment in the M's field has been stuck on the level of 1980s, and compatibility is not being provided, and therefore a smart city, in the name of those standards, it's a certain trick, even though to some extent it's true. And on the whole, I've said everything. And so thank you very much. And I hope that you have understood something. Thank you very much, Nikolai. It has been very interesting. And if we go back to the same indicators, we've touched upon quarter of those indicators, and of course the agenda looks a little bit chaotic, motley, but we should be talking about smart technologies. So in the end, I would like to give floor to Danila Nikolaev, head of the Russian Technical Society Biometric Community. He is working by remote connection. It's a hybrid format. So just a couple seconds. We can see you and hear you, and so the situation is visible. So I will briefly tell about the risks and the legal standards and what is happening. It's a little area. So I will start with the proverb that you should measure 7 times and cut off once. And we are observing different things. We think we implement fast, and then we start to understand where we have made a mistake, but it's connected to human losses and inconveniences for the client. Especially since we have a special series of standards for all stages of the life cycle, starting with algorithms and ending with everything. So as we are moving to remote channel, we have developed standards that enable us to test the attacks from remote channels, including the electrical attacks. And we have employees, sometimes there is an attack. For example, someone wants to use your voice records or photographs, etc. And international colleagues in the last document, which is connected with the criteria for the assessment of metric systems, have established the list of possible effects and confidence to the metric technologies. And of course, what I would like to pay attention to is this incorrect
to be how to build the architecture the right way. We haven't talked about the specific recommendations, how to implement them. Initially, it was said about adding some clarification how to use this or that standards. So for the future, I'd like to confirm the topic of verification of compliance of technical regulation. About this requirements that are specified in the standards. Thanks everybody to yesterday's session. Later on, we'll formulate some conclusions, some proposals for the forum resolution. Actually, we've stolen 15 minutes from the lunch break. I just suggest that we finalize with our session. Thank you.
Всем спасибо большое.